In 1908, around 790 Japanese immigrants arrived at the port of Santos on the Kosato Maru in search of better living conditions with Japan's economic and social turmoil, leaving some in poverty. They left Japan with a promise of a quickened financial prosperity which would allow them to save up and then eventually return to Japan. Despite nations like the USA limiting Japanese immigration, this was permitted in Brazil to address the labor shortage on their coffee plantations subsequent to the slavery in the country that had just recently been abolished. But when the Japanese arrived, they were met with suspicion and plagued by many obstacles typical of immigrants that stemmed from the unfamiliarity of Brazil and lack of infrastructure afforded to them. Japanese immigration continued in mandatory family units, and their work was nearly akin to slave labor. But later, most became independent farmers. But under Brazil's nationalistic policies, a 1934 immigration law severely limited Japanese entry, leading to an eventual termination of Japanese immigration in 1942 as World War II was underway. Brazil declared war against Japan and the Axis countries because Brazilian merchant ships had been sunk by the Germans, and this caused exports to suffer and Japanese leaders and diplomats to leave for Japan. So by then, around 100,000 Japanese migrants resided in Brazil, and because of World War II, were increasingly becoming more and more isolated from their mother nation while fending for themselves in a hostile country were targeted. Japanese under federal laws like travel restrictions, a Japanese language ban, and censorship of Japanese newspapers. An organization by the name of Shindo Renmei that began peacefully with encouraging their compatriots of Japan's victory of the war. But when Japan surrendered in August 13, 1945, the organization refused to believe official reports of Japan's defeat and began killing other Japanese Brazilians who believed these reports, calling them defeatist. From 1946 to 1947, they took the lives of 23 people while wounding 147 others, all of whom were Japanese Brazilians. Their terror died out when everybody was fully aware of Japan's defeat in World War II. This was the hardest time in Japanese-Brazilian history. In 1947, a society of Brazilians and Japanese people was founded as a way to strengthen relations after World War II. Thereafter, the Japanese had followed a path of hard work and an investment in education, and the opening of large manufacturing plants and agricultural settlements led to opportunities in Sao Paulo and eventually helped the Japanese build the image of great agricultural workers, which also helped their image amongst Brazilians. Today, there are roughly 1.5 million Japanese Brazilians in Brazil. Nowadays, the challenge facing Japanese communities in Brazil is cultural, because since the Japanese had eventually assimilated, perhaps forcefully, the descendants with their fluency in Portuguese have little knowledge of their ethnic and cultural roots. There's even an ignorance of the Japanese language to some extent. By consequence, the Japanese is really a means of communication among family members, but useful within business and leisure. But in recent years, Brazilian cities have become familiar with all aspects of Japanese culture, and Japanese festivals are spread all over Brazil, by which the descendants of today present themselves to society at large.